You're listening to In Sickness, a podcast about caregiving with Allison Breininger and Justin Bima. Good morning, Allison.
Hi, Justin. How are you?
I'm doing good. I am very excited to talk about today's topic.
You are? Let's talk.
We're talking about hobbies today.
Da-da-da-da.
And I am a hobby person.
Okay.
I've always had various hobbies. I enjoy having some kind of thing that I can put my energy into. I love the learning aspect of picking up a new hobby, kind of all that information gathering, learning how to do something new. Like that's just something that really is meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm.
So as part of this, we're going to talk about hobbies as they relate to caregiving and kind of hobbies that have to go, new hobbies, how they can fit in and all of that. So I was thinking about how hobbies have changed, ebbed and flowed throughout my caregiving journey.
Yeah.
So to start out, when Sarah first got sick, my main hobby would have been, I think, fly fishing. I had started that shortly before. And so that was an activity that I had to leave the house for
Right.
Several hours or more. And initially when Sarah was first kind of declining, we didn't know what was going on. She was sleeping a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so it felt okay to get up early on a weekend morning, go fish, be back by 11.
Mm-hmm.
She wouldn't be up yet. And that was actually a really good activity. And I think in our early episodes, I talk about some of the standing in the water and feeling, and something about that was very therapeutic, really able to think through what was going on and kind of process and just be out in nature, be in a new setting.
Yeah.
But then as she kind of declined more and I couldn't get away for as much, I leaned into more of so for fly fishing, you have these little flies that are, the hooks with bits of feather and fur and all that on there. And I, started doing that a lot more.
Making them?
Making them at home because I could do that without leaving the house. I ended up with a lot more than I could ever use fishing wise.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I would do swaps with people where, everybody would tie X number and then you'd get one of each from everybody and kind of have kind of a challenge that you're doing with that. So that was another good thing. And something that through the fly fishing and the tying, community, I found a good online community around that. And there were like-minded people doing the same thing and kind of felt part of something.
Sure.
So that was one. The other hobby, I guess, that I was doing at the same time was brewing beer. And that was a big one for me. I had a lot of identity in that. This was something I did. I also was a beer judge and would, go around and judge competitions.
Wow.
I ran some training classes for people.
I knew this about you.
Yeah. So learning, these are certain off flavors that, something went wrong. This is what went wrong. This is how you would fix that.
Sure.
About all the different styles. And so that was something that I really enjoyed, and something that also there was a local club around that I was kind of right there at the start of it.
Okay.
And there was a good community there as well.
Yeah. And you could leave the house and...
That was still when I could leave the house. Okay. And so that's something where the community part of that faded as Sarah got more sick and I couldn't get away in an evening to go to a monthly meeting kind of thing.
Sure.
But I still kept, brewing at home for a while, and that continued for a while. That's something, it shifted. I couldn't do it as much. I changed my equipment so I didn't have to, it was less hands-on because, normally it's maybe 5 hours on a Saturday morning to go through the whole process.
Okay.
And you're not active the whole time, but you're doing stuff a fair bit of that time or watching. And then there's also a lot of cleaning. And so eventually that one became just kind of too much.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think part of it was, I was getting burned out. I was getting tired and just, it felt daunting. And so that was a hard one to set aside.
Sure.
And be this is not a thing I do anymore.
Yeah.
And I know that that's, probably a common experience for caregivers with hobbies is
right.
There's something that just doesn't fit with their new life. And so, I held on to a lot of that stuff a lot longer than maybe I needed to, but it just felt too much to make that final break from it.
Yeah.
Especially because it felt like something that I'd invested so much into the local community and
sure.
I had a lot of identity there. And I think that's common for people to feel like their hobby is part of their identity.
Mm-hmm.
It can be.
Yeah.
So that was that hobby. As Sarah was sick and I couldn't leave the house as much, woodworking.
Oh yeah.
I kind of got into a bit.
Yeah.
Specifically with like hand tools.
Sure.
And I bought some old hand tools, like some, 60, 70, 80-year-old tools, and like restored them.
Wow.
Was doing that for a bit, still do some of that. But then I got into carving spoons for a while.
That's right. I feel like when we first met that you were into that. Yeah.
Because that was something I could do at home. I could pick up and work on that. And that was a really helpful thing for a long time while she was sick, because it was doing something with my hands. It was kind of like you're focused on the cuts that you're making on the wood. You can't like not pay attention or you're going to cut yourself. Right. And so you get out of your head.
Sure.
So that was a helpful one.
But is that the kind of thing that you could just like, if she needed you could just like put it down and walk away?
Exactly. I could set it down and walk away.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So that was great. Yeah. And then let's see, what am I doing now? Birding. That's the current one. So that came out of the pandemic.
Right.
And I think I've talked about this before, but it was during the like lockdown.
Yeah.
I read an article from some hermit in the Rockies about advice to stay sane in isolation.
Right.
And one of his tips was to find something, doesn't matter what it is. It could be the daily temperature, whatever, and record it every day.
Oh, yeah.
And so I had a notebook and I wrote down the birds that I saw at my window every day.
Yeah.
And a few of them I knew because I've always had an interest in nature and all that. And so like I knew some of the common birds around here.
Sure.
But there were others that like I'd never noticed before. And I had to like look up, okay, what is that?
Yeah.
And that was always exciting. And that just kind of spawned from there as far as, learning new birds. I ended up with like 3 notebooks of all of these bird recordings from those days during the pandemic. And this has been one where I've really gone kind of all into it. Like this is my main thing now, and it gets me outside. Yeah. I've met people through it. I've done classes. I do field trips sometimes and meet new people. Yeah. I volunteered to like staff a viewing station at this birding festival locally. And like cool. Strangers came up and I would show them birds. And it was just like, normally I'm not a very outgoing person, particularly with strangers, but if there's like a topic, right, then it feels good. Sure. So that's something that was kind of on the tail end of Sarah being sick. Right. Where I could get out more and do this. Right. And so that kind of it's a little bit for full circle. Whereas at the beginning I was going out for fly fishing, and now I'm going out for birding and just getting in nature and getting that. I don't know, rejuvenation there. Right. Right. So, right. Because now at this point you can certainly like leave her, exactly that kind of thing, but she still rests more than you do. Right. And so it's like, it's fine if you get up and you're gone and whatever, and it's not a big deal. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yes. So that's kind of roughly the arc. I think there may be some that I've missed that may come up as we talk, but sure. Amazing. I have some follow-up questions. Yeah, go for it. So, I mean, it's interesting to think about, like you said, like some were outside of the house and then they were inside of the house, but involved. And then even that you realize like, oh no, I need to be it can't be that involved. Time, energy, like mess, all of that kind of thing. And then it went to like at its most minimum, something that you could just like do in your pocket. Right. And then put down and then has sort of, shifted out. And what I wonder is like, as you like, it was the beer. I think you said that as you gave it up, I'm sure there was some grief around that because for sure it was part of your identity and you had this community. When you had that moment of like, I can't do this anymore. In your mind, were you like, for this season, or were you like, I'm never going to get back here again? Like, what did you think in that moment around? Because I mean, we never know, right? Were you like, this is my new reality and I will never get to come back to this hobby again? Or were you just sort of like, this is a rough patch. I'll put this down and maybe I'll get to pick it up later? Yeah, I think that was one where I just started doing it less and less. And it kind of tapered down, and I came to the point where just like, I'm not doing this a lot. This stuff isn't being used to some extent. Like this equipment should be somewhere where it's getting used. Sure. And that particular hobby really felt like, okay, I'm not putting it down for a season. I'm walking away from it.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the grief, particularly around that one, was difficult. And that's not to say that someday I won't pick it up again. And I'd like to find ways to stay somewhat involved in that community to some extent. But it's also like, I don't know. I have new things that I'm putting energy into too.
Yeah.
And I wonder too, if part of it, like I really enjoy, and I've talked about this with my therapist, like I think we were talking about like the grief around putting this hobby away.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I really enjoy the like diving into something new and like doing the research, getting the books, reading, understanding it all.
Yeah.
And like, that's kind of where I'm in with birds right now.
Yeah.
And for a long time, like that's what, like beer was really scratching that itch.
Sure.
And not that I learned everything that there is to know about beer, but like I had done that big deep dive on that.
Yeah. Well,
and
you were a beer judge.
Right. And I still do that maybe once a year. So that's not totally gone. But I wonder if too, there was part of it that like there wasn't as much learning, and that kind of played a role in that as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And I think depression, I think also played a role in that too. Whereas if you're depressed and don't have the energy to do anything, something that takes that amount of time, a whole bunch of cleaning, like that's daunting.
Right. Well, I'm even thinking like depression or not, like when I'm like, oh my gosh, by Saturday, like I'm tired.
Yeah, it's your day to some extent. Yeah.
And so when you're like, get up early and already, and you're back by 11, and then you're, all of a sudden I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing of it, right? Is that I'll just speak for myself, is that like, I think that caregiving takes so much energy.
Yes.
And so sometimes it's like a hobby that's also going to take a lot of energy or a lot of time or a lot of money.
Just isn't compatible.
Right. Because like we often have less time, energy, money capacity than the average person. And so that kind of whittles down like maybe the hobbies that are available to us.
You're right. That are accessible.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, we threw this topic out to our people.
Yeah.
And got some like voicemails and got some messages. And so I'm excited today. People were really excited to think about this. And people said that it was kind of fun to think through. And it sounds like it was even fun for you to like think through your arc of like, where have I been and how has that impacted it? So I'm glad we're talking about this.
Yeah.
One of the people who left a message, I feel like she just sort of like summarized it very well. So let's start with the message from her.
Okay.
Hi, Allison and Justin. I love your question about hobbies and caregiving. My hobbies were the first thing to go when I started caregiving. In addition to the lack of time, money, and mental capacity, it felt unfair to enjoy my hobbies when my person couldn't enjoy his. Eventually, I forced myself to find a couple minutes a week. I adapted my hobbies and tried not to compare them to how I once accomplished or enjoyed them. Some hobbies, like horseback riding, traveling, and attending in-person events, were abandoned altogether, and I still grieve for them. But I picked up new hobbies and joined online communities, which helped me feel less isolated. I've adapted all my other hobbies, like knitting and sewing and gaming, by changing when, where, and how I work on them. This has also helped me learn that my productivity does not determine my value and worth, and my person and I have found new fun ways to connect through new shared hobbies.
So a couple things that struck me about what she said was, she said, my hobbies were the first to go. Right. And I think hobbies, I think are so important for all of us, and we can see them as fluff, right? We can see them as frosting, as like, it's not my income, and it's not my this, it's not my that. And so I think that we heard from a lot of people like, hobbies, what are hobbies? Like they were the first thing to go.
Yeah. They feel frivolous or indulgent when your world crashes down and someone is very sick and you're putting all your energy into that. It's like, why would I, it feels wrong. People talked about feeling guilty.
Yeah.
Spending time on themselves, doing something that they enjoy instead of focusing on their person.
Yeah. And I think guilt came up a lot, right? I mean, as it does so often for us as caregivers. So, she said that like she felt guilty. And I think some people feel guilty about, like you said, spending the time. Maybe it's time that you should spend with your person. Maybe it's time away from your person. Maybe it's money when you have all these medical bills. But some people have said too that they felt guilty because their person couldn't do it. Maybe it was a thing that they both used to do.
Right.
and now the person can't do it anymore, and they feel guilty that they still can. Or even that their person is like, I'm picturing like when Sarah was in bed and then you're like, I'm off to go fly fishing, right? And she was probably too sick to even,
Yeah.
But like, I just think like there could potentially be guilt from that, from the caregiver to be like, I'm going to go do this fun thing while you're staying home feeling terrible. And so the guilt of that, I think, can be huge. And so I think, but what is the, like, at the heart of it, like, why are hobbies important? Because there's all the reasons not to do it that we've just listed, but what are the reasons why we should do it? Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. And I think, it probably varies to some extent from person to person, but I think that hobbies give us, for me, something to identify with outside of being a caregiver.
Yeah.
Like, it gives you a pocket of life where you have full control, full agency, full whatever to do a thing for yourself.
Yeah.
And for me, that identity piece felt important a lot, that I could identify as a spoon carver, not just a caregiver, or as a fly fisher, not just a caregiver.
Yeah.
And having that outlet for myself, wherever I was at in that journey of different hobbies, whether it was something I was out of the house, whether it was something I was just sitting in a chair carving a spoon, like that time for myself was important. And really, I think, helped me keep going.
Yeah.
And also, in my situation, for a lot of it, I mean, Sarah spent a lot of time sleeping.
Yeah.
And there were times where it was important for me to be in there with her. But also there was a lot of time where, I could be doing chores around the house.
Right.
I could be just kind of sitting around doing nothing.
Right.
Trying to be quiet and not wake her up.
Right.
Or I could okay, what's something that I can use this time to help enrich myself? So I think in that sense, there's some importance to hobbies. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think about, we talk about glimmers, which is the opposite of triggers. And, like yesterday, or I don't know, one day Sean and I were driving and it was like gray and drizzly and like the news is terrible and everything. And then I was like, look, the garden shop is opening. And I was like, I'm just trying to find moments of joy, and I think that that's part of it is like, if we just like, we have jobs and we have, and some of it can feel mundane and repetitive and, like all of these things. And so to have these, typically hobbies are something that bring us these little glimmers of joy.
Yeah.
And something that we're choosing, whereas often most of us were thrust into this role.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily something we chose, or expected. And so to have something that we choose to do, it's not like, oh, it's 9:00 on Monday, we got to go to work, right? It's like, no, I'm choosing to go to this exercise class. I'm choosing to go to the garden store. I'm choosing, and to have those little glimmers. Like, so you and I, before we started recording this morning, we were just talking about, I'm all about the plants.
Yes.
So that is my big hobby at this moment. And I don't know where or how that started. Because I was telling somebody the other day, Sean and I, years and years ago, pre-diagnosis, pre-Maya, all the things, like, what was life? I don't even know. I can't remember back that far. We were on an HGTV show.
I remember when I learned about that.
Yes. They did our backyard. And I remember saying to them, like, I don't know anything about plants. So you've got to make this like so low maintenance because I don't know anything about plants. And I'm like, who is that person?
Right.
Because now my entire yard, everything is covered in plants. So I'm not sure like when or how this started. It's also, I think, probably just like what happens when you become 45.
Yeah, this could be.
But what I have found is that whether it's my indoor plants or my outdoor plants, it's something that I can do in little bits of time. Sean can be sleeping. I can be in the backyard. If he needs me, I can just come in. I'm not, except for my multiple trips to the garden store, I'm not leaving.
Right.
I'm like digging, and there's all these benefits of like, that they say of like digging in the dirt is so good for you and being outside and all of that. But I think for me, it's also the like watching it happen. Like every day is a different day. Yeah. So pretty soon, if it ever stops snowing here in Minnesota, it's going to be this like glorious thing where all the plants I planted last year, I hope, are going to come out. And so it's this thing of like, look.
Yeah.
And so, and even right now I have seeds inside that I'm growing. And so it's just like this little glimmery thing.
Yeah.
That every morning I can be like, hi buddies, you're bigger. You know, it's like something that's just like a little bit of joy.
Yeah.
You know, or anytime one of my indoor plants has like a new leaf. It might sound really silly, but it's like something new and exciting when it feels like everything else is just like mundane or routine or this or that. And so to me, that has felt really important to be able to like grab onto those little glimmers and to surround myself, I think, with loveliness. You know, like the plants then are something that like, then my environment is nicer and, you know, all of that. And so, so I think that's something that's come up for me and why I think it's important for me is it's something I can do, a way I can spend my time, something I can, you know, that can bring me joy. And I think that there's all kinds of reasons that people have stopped doing their hobbies or adapted their hobbies or have brought on new ones. And so some of the things that we've heard from people that we talked or that sent in messages, one is that it used to be something that they did together and they can't anymore. One, they can't leave the house. A couple people talked about germs. One person has their partner is immune compromised. And so the caregiver used to go to like a Pilates class or something and doesn't feel like they can be indoors. So she said she goes to like outdoors exercise classes when that's an option. But I mean, that's a thing, right? It's like, you know, like I'm supposed to watch my little 7-year-old nieces tomorrow and they have the sniffles. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do it, you know? So like germs, there's a thing for a lot of people. I think that too messy or time consuming, you brought that up. But somebody else said that about painting, that they used to like paint with a lot of acrylic paints. It took a lot of time and mess. And now they moved over to like watercolors. And colored pencils. Because it's like anything that is that messy or that time consuming, something because we know as caregivers at any moment. We're just going to like at the drop of a hat, we're going to need to like pick up and run.
And we don't know for how long, if it's a 5-minute thing or going to be 2 hours.
Exactly. So having this thing that's going to take an hour to clean up is like not an option. Often. Expensive. Right. We know that often hobbies can cost money and that as caregivers, we often have less money. Loud. Right. You said like, what can you do that's quiet?
Right.
So if our person is sleeping a lot, like if our hobby was like drum set or you know, but I think that's the case. Like, what is it that we can do that's quiet? Feeling guilty, then enjoying something that they can't. Or like when they can't leave, right? I think part of it too is like we're tired. What I mentioned before, like the things that maybe before sounded lovely and we had the capacity for that now we're tired. And the other one is maybe feeling like we don't have enough time. You know, before maybe we had that 5 hours on a Saturday and now that's filled up with filling up med boxes and, you know, all of the things. So when you hear that's a long list of why these things might change, but what strikes you from that list as you listen?
I think it's part of what we've talked about where our life has had this giant shift and it's like you have to rearrange stuff. And I think like is often the case, we rearrange everything for our person, which is important. But we put ourselves last. And you know, maybe that can work in the short term, but if we do that in the long term, that's just not going to be optimal for everyone, for yourself. So that's kind of what comes to mind there. The other thing that occurred to me as we were talking, and it ties into the not having the time, is I have had a lot of time for hobbies because I don't have children. I see my friends who are parents, my siblings who are parents, kids are busy these days. And I think it's always been the case that parenting is a lot of work, but like that takes up so much time that if you have, energy. If you are a parent, like that that's maybe when your hobbies went. And then if you have caregiving now, like, where is the time? And I think that's a very real thing. And I just want to acknowledge that, like, yes, not everyone has as much time as like I do right now to pursue this kind of stuff. And
I was thinking about that, about my sort of hobby arc. And I'm like, did I have hobbies? But I'm like, well, no, because I have this kid.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And, that was my hobby or my time, like that was how I spent my time. And so I think you're right. And now part of that for me is now like being an empty nester.
Yeah.
And having a husband who sleeps a lot is like, wait a minute, I do have time now.
Right.
What does that mean? Right. And so I think that's part of why I like leaning into the hobbies now again in this season of my life, whereas it wasn't really an option for a while.
Yeah. I wonder with that, if they're like with the parenting side of it, if, they're going to leave the house and you can kind of,
we hope. No,
we hope.
Just kidding.
Yeah. Here I am with Sarah living at her parents' house.
Right.
But like, you can look ahead towards like, once you're an empty nester, then you can have time for yourself. And not that that's maybe the best perspective to have, but like with caregiving, it's like, you don't see an end.
Right.
And it's maybe harder to, I don't know, just a thought.
Well, and either way, right? Like it's, we got to carve out that time.
Yeah.
And I know it's easier said than done. Right. But I think that whether it's parenting or caregiving or both, we cross ourselves off the list. And so even if it's parenting, to be like, okay, well, in 18 years,
right,
I will have a hobby again. Right. Yeah. And so I think something that we can talk about is like, what are the little things or what are the ways that we can adapt, right? To parenting, caregiving, both.
Yeah.
So like you and the spoon thing, like that's a great example of like, that's just something you found that you could do. And I know you don't have a lot of like hospital stays, that kind of thing, but I can picture somebody potentially, I don't know how messy that is, but like potentially doing something like that. Right.
I don't know that I'd bring knives into the hospital personally.
Good point.
But there are hobbies that could work, small hobbies that could work in that kind of setting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually just remembered, because I haven't done it for a few months, but that I got super into embroidery in the last year.
Yeah, that's right. You were doing that.
I was. And that was something that I actually started because Sean had this big surgery coming up. And I had bought an embroidery kit for somebody else. And then I thought, you know what? I actually want to do that kit while I'm sitting there in that waiting room that day. Like, I want something lovely to do. And I was there for a while. Almost every night I would like put on my audiobook and my earbuds and sit in bed under my electric blanket, and I would like embroider. And I started doing them for people in my life. Yeah. And then I would like think of them, and it was lovely and kind of meditative and whatever. And so, but that was a thing that's why it was too, is that it was like, it came from, I needed something to do on surgery day. Yeah. Something with my hands. Right. And something that was lovely and not just worrying, you know.
I could see knitting filling that same void as well. Yeah. For sure.
Totally. And we asked some people, and so some of the things that people said that could stay in the season or that they adapted, knitting was one. Okay. Reading. One person said that their mother, who they care for, is a big reader. And so it's something they're able to do together.
Oh, that's lovely.
Someone had a photography business and then had to give up the business and it sort of as a hobby, but then ended up using it to like document their person's sort of illness and all of that. And so sort of adapted it in that way. Yeah. One person got workout equipment in the home. So they said they could just like, if her father was doing okay, she would just like sneak out to the workout space, be able to work out and then be close by if needed. I think I mentioned the art one. Yeah. Going from painting to colored pencils. And so those were just like some, adapted things that people were like, okay, I did this in one way before and now I'm doing it in a slightly different way. Yeah. So I didn't get rid of it all the way, Right. Yeah. Yeah. Back to some of the things that people had to get rid of. Yeah. Yeah. Traveling. Yeah. I heard that a lot. Right. I'm in this moment this week where we're going into like a week of terrible appointments. And I kid you not, everybody I know is like on a tropical island right now because it's like spring break season. Okay. Yeah. Like everybody this week is going to some beautiful place. And I was even sitting in my living room looking out and like the Uber pulls up and all my neighbors like pile into a van with their suitcases. I'm like, really?
That's tough.
So travel. Yeah. Travel. Right. Travel, I think either with your person or even travel by yourself. Yeah. Because if you can't leave your person at home or, you know what I mean? Like, or you're too tired or the germs or whatever, right? Traveling either way can go away.
Yeah. With travel, I mean, that's something that Sarah and I would do before she got sick. And, once she got sick, like that was not something she could do. Right. And so when it was possible, we kind of figured out how to make it so I could get away for short things, like 1 night, 2 night kind of things, like not week long things, but kind of so that I could get a little bit of that travel, spending time on myself, but in a very conscious, short little bite of travel, I guess. And so, just getting used to, okay, I'm quick dash out, quick dash back, as opposed to like a leisurely, week somewhere kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So a way that you've adapted it to still be able to do something. Yeah. Somebody said they were pursuing their master's degree and had to stop. And I've heard that from a couple of people, because that feels, it's one of these where it's like, that's extra time. And often people who are pursuing a master's degree, they're doing it on top of working. Right. And so having to like put that on hold, and that's all kinds of, I imagine, grief.
That's tough.
That goes along with that. Hiking. One person said they and their person used to hike, and that is not available to them anymore.
It must be extra hard to lose hobbies that you did with your person.
Yeah.
And I don't have that as much as it sounds like some of these other people maybe do, that we got responses from. But yeah, because if you could do it on your own, you could go hiking on your own, maybe if you can get away. But then the whole time you're doing that, you're like, oh, I wish they were here. Or I remember,
even you traveling, when you just said that about the trip, right? Like you figured out a way to make that work, but also it's like, oh,
we used to do this together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the hiking person said that she doesn't feel safe going by herself. And then she asked some friends, and then they said, okay, but then that hasn't happened, And so, it's like when you had this built-in person before. And also, I imagine there's some guilt there too, is that if she's like, okay, well, I'm going to go off hiking just like you used to do, and now you can't, so bye, like, yeah. Some of the new things.
Yeah, let's talk about some new things.
Yeah. One person joined a dining club. I would like to know more about what that means with their mom. And then the mom is the person they're caring for.
Yeah.
And so they said that that's just been a good way to like meet community and that kind of thing. One person, I love this, like because of all the anger that they were experiencing after their person's diagnosis, started doing some self-defense classes. So I love that it's not just like, I need a hobby. It was like, I'm having this emotion. I need an outlet for this emotion.
Right.
Therefore, I'm going to find a hobby that meets that outlet. You know what I mean?
That's very wise.
It's so wise.
Yeah.
The same person also uses art to express their emotions. And so, but I love that. It's like, okay, I have this new emotion because of the situation I'm in. Therefore, I'm going to find a hobby that will help me with that. Like, nice. I know that I'm not the only one that the working in the yard is a theme. Somebody said just like sometimes all I can do is at least walk, look out the window, right? And see the birds.
Yep.
And so it's not necessarily even like going on a birding adventure like you get to do, but just like, and we've set up bird feeders, and again, it's probably because I'm 45, but like suddenly it's like, wow, birds,
right? And I'm obviously biased,
right?
But if if all you can do is look out the window, put up a bird feeder.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you don't know what the birds are called. Like, oh, these guys are back.
Right.
Oh, that's one I haven't seen before.
Sure.
And that's not in every case, but in a lot of cases, that's something you can do with your person.
Yeah.
You can sit in the living room and look out the window at the bird feeder.
Yeah.
It's something to kind of check on each day.
Yeah.
See who's there. I think that's a great way to kind of introduce a small bite of a hobby into your life. Yeah.
Well, it's a glimmer too, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, look, there's one. Oh,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just like an unexpected little sort of blip of joy.
Yeah.
That happens, right? Yeah. Yeah. And then another one, I love this, is somebody took up the ukulele because she said it's small.
Yeah.
It's compact. And I think she said her husband also plays the ukulele. And so then they can play duets together. And she can bring it with her to the hospital when she's visiting him. And it's quiet enough and small enough that, she can like play, and it's soothing to him. And I was like, well, that's lovely. And I can't remember if she said that she used to play a different, like bigger instrument and like scaled down. But I love that. Like, it's like, we don't have to say like, well, I used to play the cello and now I can't, right? It's like, no. Like, okay, what is this thing? You know, like it's a smaller thing. So those are some of the new things that folks shared with us. So first of all, I just want to say thanks to everybody who
for sure
sent in messages and voicemails and notes. It was fun to read all of those. You said a second ago about like taking a tiny, you know, even if it's like setting up a bird feeder.
Yeah.
Right. Like, what do you think? How can people, because I'm sure some people are listening and they're like, yeah, cool. I don't have time, money, energy, capacity for any of this stuff.
Yep.
My hobbies were gone. They're gone forever.
Yeah.
I don't, you know, I'm not on the list.
Yep.
And we talked about why these are important.
Yeah.
And so what would you say to somebody who says like, I just can't, like, how could they even begin?
Right. I start small would be my number one thing. Like maybe to start off, you spend 5 minutes in the morning looking out the window at whatever's happening in your yard. If you have birds or things like that or whatever, like, or observing the trees as they go through winter, spring. You see the leaves beginning to come. You see the leaves in summer, fall, observing that kind of change. Just observing and being aware of the world around you. Yeah. I think is kind of, I don't know if we can call that a hobby. Sure. But it's kind of, I don't know, getting in touch with something outside yourself. Yeah. I think that's something.
Sounds grounding.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah.
To like look and be like, oh, you know, this is the same, but this is different. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's like just sort of the looking up and looking out because we're so, I think, focused on our person or focused on our phone or focused on a screen. And so just to like look up and out out the window, I think could be helpful.
Yeah. I think crossword puzzle could be a great one. I mean, that's not for everybody, but, you know, like maybe
Wordle.
Yeah, well, I was thinking like whatever your local paper is, or the New York Times, if you're ambitious, do the crossword every week. And that's something where you can kind of work on it throughout the day. You know, you can, if you can ask your person and you can kind of do it together. Like, hey, what do you think? What's a word for this? Sure. And that can be a little interactive there that you can kind of both work on. I think something like that, or Sudoku. Yeah. Something small, or you mentioned Wordle, something little like that. Yeah.
Well, and that's the kind of thing too, you could put in your pocket. You could bring with you to the doctor's appointment, you know.
Exactly.
I know two people who have done, it's called Words with Friends.
Yeah. Like Scrabble, basically.
Like Scrabble, but but that's a way, because, you know, we talk about caregiving can be so isolating. And you talked about the community you felt that you lost with some of those hobbies. Yeah. And so, like, I know someone, she did this with her like 95-year-old grandma every day, is that they played Words with Friends together. That's right. Lovely. And so it's the kind of thing where you can, like, you know, it's just a way to have a little bit of a connection with someone outside of your house, even when you can't leave your house.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Another thing, and I thought of this is true in my life, is, you know, I do the cooking here, and 5 nights a week, I got to feed everybody.
That's a lot of nights.
It's life. So I can just, you know, that's a thing that I go through. Or for me, and this happened before we moved in here, but like became more interested in cooking and like wanting to try new things, wanting to get better at techniques. And like, I just enjoy cooking, which is why I do the cooking here, because I enjoy it. Yeah. But using that as like, well, it's a thing I got to do anyway. Sure. Let's have some fun with it. Let's, get a new cookbook and cook my way through it. Sure. Or, you know, maybe it's baking cookies or something like that. Like, right. You know, I think that's another, finding something. I don't know if there's other examples of that where it's something you have to do anyway. Right. So like, make it more interesting, make it fun, figure out how you can, you know, turn that into sort of a hobby as well. Sure. I'm thinking, I love that. And I'm thinking of things like washing the dishes or driving. Like, can you have, like, I'm all into musicals, you know, I'm right. Very I know that about you. Yeah. So I often have musicals playing in the background. Yeah. And it just makes everything better. Right. For me. Yeah. Maybe not the other people in the house, but, so thinking about that, right. Is it like when I'm driving, is it listening to a podcast? If you have to, you know, if you have to wash the dishes, if you have to clean the house, whatever, like, I think that music, even just listening to music, is such an underrated joy bringer. Yeah. Right. And so even if it's, you know, and I don't know if you would call that a hobby, but like
I would probably say my obsession with musicals could be it could be considered a hobby.
Yeah.
And so like, even if it's just like elevating the thing that you're already doing, right? By putting music on in the background.
Right.
Or
And that
whatever that is.
That could turn into like you're trying to find new music that you enjoy, maybe putting together like playlists.
Exactly.
You know, I don't know if you probably could put together a like musical playlist of like, these are the great songs. You have them. Okay, great.
Yes, of course I do.
Yeah. So, you know, that's something to, you know, it's not just listening to music. It could be curating it. It could be,
right.
And you can share that with people. You can share that with your friends. You can, you know, there's ways to, I guess, turn what could seem to be a passive activity into something a little more interesting.
Yeah. Well, and then even I recently looked, because, you know, I live in the Twin Cities. It's an amazing space to live.
Yeah.
And so I looked at all the musicals that were coming to town. And I found like a whole long list of them that I wanted to go to. And I reached out to my other friends who I thought might be interested and said, here's what I'm going to. Who wants to come?
Yeah.
And then we picked all these different ones so that we have all these musicals on the calendar.
That's great.
And then there's a singer that I love, Cynthia Erivo from Wicked, which my friend Justin hasn't seen yet, but that's fine. I still will have a podcast with him.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. And I'm so into her that Sean and I found tickets to go see her in Philadelphia this summer. And so, you know, we'll see. Who knows if that'll get to happen. But again, like, that's because of this hobby of like listening to her and then going on a deep dive about like all the things she does. And then like, you know what I mean? Going to see her in person. So, but all that stems from like, okay, when I'm getting ready in the morning, I'm going to turn on some musicals, right? That's going to I have to stand here and get ready anyway. I might as well like add some loveliness to it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you bringing up, you know, reaching out to your friends as far as, okay, who wants to do this thing with me?
Yeah.
That's a good segue into supporters.
Yeah.
So as a supporter, what can you do to help a caregiver with their hobbies, find hobbies, pursue hobbies?
Sure.
What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think I always like to use like, hey, I just heard this on this podcast as a like in, but to say, you know, like, I'm wondering if there are things that you used to do or that you haven't been able to do that you're missing. And if so, is there anything, how could I support in letting that and helping you to get back to that? Or is there a new hobby you want to pursue? I would be happy to sit with your person once a week so that you can go out and I would be happy to like get you that gym membership or go to the plant store with you, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Can I jump in a minute?
Of course.
Yeah. I think the first thing you said of sitting with them, talking to them, asking them if there's hobbies that they can't do anymore, like just that. Like, you don't have to jump right away to like, how can you help them solve that problem?
Yeah.
I think sitting with them and allowing them to grieve that. Yeah. Because it seems, I felt this for myself.
Yeah.
It felt frivolous to grieve a hobby. Like a hobby is like a bonus thing that you get to do in your life. It's something indulgent for yourself.
Sure.
And so like, it just felt very strange to feel grief around that. But once I once I came to terms like, no, I can grieve that.
Yeah.
Like that was very helpful for me processing that.
Sure.
And it helped me let go of some stuff part of that is realizing the identity that you have that's tied up into that, and realizing that you are something outside of that as well, that was part of your identity. It's not your whole identity. All of that can shift. And so I think just that first piece can be really important.
Yeah.
All the other stuff is good too.
Yeah.
But I think taking that initial time could be really meaningful to the caregiver, because they don't have that space a lot to really talk about that or have those feelings or feel like they can.
Right. Well, I feel like even what we heard from our listeners is that a lot of people were like, I hadn't really thought about this topic. You putting this topic out there helped me really think about this. And so even someone taking the time to say, hey, I'm wondering, like, are there hobbies that you used to have that you don't have anymore, that you're no longer able to partake in because you're a caregiver? Pause.
Yeah.
I bet that feels, I wonder if that feels hard that you can't do that anymore. Pause. Right. Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you for slowing me down, because I think you're right. We go too quickly to fix it.
Yeah.
And solutions. And really often people want space and just to be heard. Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Yeah.
So back to like, what can you do actively beyond that? Like you mentioned with your friends, like being available to do something with the caregiver for to allow them to pursue their hobby or whatever it is.
Yep.
And maybe it's not something that you love,
right?
But maybe it's something they need a second person to be able to go out and do. Like if it's someone who enjoys hiking, and for safety reasons they don't feel like they can do that alone.
Yep.
Maybe it's not the way you most want to spend a Saturday.
Right.
Maybe don't tell them that.
Yeah.
But like help them facilitate their what they love to do.
Yes.
I think can be great.
Yes.
It could be something like, hey, do you want to take a class at the community college? Like they have these continuing education kind of classes where it's like, you know, pottery, and you go take a half day pottery class or a cooking class, or, you know, if you know something that they love to do that they don't have time for, like to pursue as much as they like, something like that. Or if they enjoy trying new things, that could be something. I think there's always can you be with their person while they go out and do something. And again, that's very dependent on your relationship with the person they're caring for and all of that. But that can be meaningful, particularly I think if it's a recurring thing.
Yes.
If it's like they love to do this, I don't know, they have a board game night with friends.
Right.
And that they used to go to every week and they can't. I'll sit with your person, you know, every week. Or maybe it's a group of friends or family that kind of
rotate or something.
And make sure that that's available so that you can go out and do that thing.
Yep.
I think that could be very helpful.
And I think too, the piece, I always worry about having to cancel things.
Yeah.
And so even like with these musical tickets, you know, already one of them we had to cancel. And so I think just also like if you sign up for something with your friend who's a caregiver, just know, right? And be very gracious about like, they might have to cancel and that's okay. You know what I mean? Just because I think that's always like a background fear for me that I like, oh, why should I schedule something with somebody? Because then I'm probably gonna have to cancel, you know? So yeah. This is fun to talk about. Yeah. And it's just making me think about, I think it's just like, sometimes I joke around like, oh, like I'm a garden nerd or it's like a whatever, but I think it's like, no, this is actually really good for me. Yeah. You know, in all the ways. And so how can we think about that and to not see hobbies as frosting, but to see them as like, no, this is like a core important thing for all of us. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right. Good. Well, good talk, my friend. Are you going to go off and do a hobby today?
I'm not sure yet. We'll see. The weather is nice, so we'll see if I get outside. Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. Yeah. All right. We'll talk to you later.
Sounds good.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to In Sickness. Find us online at insickness.care or on Instagram at insicknesspodcast. You can send your questions and comments to insicknesspodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or fellow caregiver, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening, and take care.